You can't have too much of a good thing. Or at least that's what a lot of people like to tell us. Whether that's actually an accurate thing is very much up for debate, especially when it comes to the realms of TV shows and movies. After all, just because we liked one show doesn't mean we need a million spin-offs of that singular show. And yet, Hollywood does it anyway. One series that has been getting the spin-off treatment quite a bit lately is Yellowstone. They've already released 1883, and now they've one more on the way. So allow us to show you everything we know about 6666 so far. Number 6. The Build-Up. First, Paramount Plus debuted the show's prequel series Yellowstone 1883 in December 2021 on the streaming service. Now, they're giving Yellowstone fans something else to look forward to. They're introducing us to a whole new world as part of a brand new spin-off series tentatively titled 6666. Yellowstone creator Taylor Sheridan will be behind the spin-off, which means it'll have a familiar look and feel to the popular series that has dominated cable ratings for the last few years. Which is not a bad thing at all, because a lot of times spin-offs don't have that consistency of storytelling or other compounding elements. But since the main man behind it is in charge, we can potentially expect good things. Still, there are many unknowns surrounding the new spin-off series, including full details about the show's release date, cast, storyline, and more. But we do know some things. Number 5, potential release. It's still too early to tell exactly when 6666 will be released. When Paramount Plus announced that 3 of Sheridan's new shows, including 1883, would start streaming sometime in 2021, 6666 was not included in that list. That means it could be another year or two until we make our way out to West Texas. And that would also line up with the fact that he was no doubt making 1883 before the 6666 green light was potentially given, and as such had to focus on one thing at a time. More than likely, we can expect a tease of it during this current year and maybe a release in 2023. But as with all things, it's hard to tell what might happen. Not the least of which is that COVID is still a major threat to production, and in rather open areas like the set pieces for shows like Yellowstone, 1883, and now 6666, you wouldn't be wrong for thinking an outbreak could set things back. Number 4. Potential cast? Well, the cast list still remains up in the air. Shortly after the show was announced, rumors started swirling about Jefferson White, who plays Jimmy, and Ryan Bingham, who plays Walker's potential involvement in 6666. Now, it seems like part of this might be true. After Jimmy broke his promise to John, Kevin Costner, to never rodeo again, the ranch hand eventually returned to Yellowstone. But it wasn't like before. In order to keep a promise, John organized for Jimmy to head down to West Texas to the 4 Sixes Ranch, aka 6666. Get it? But before he rode off with Travis, Taylor Sheridan, Walker came by and gave Jimmy a quick rundown of what to expect. Where you're heading are some of the best cowboys on earth. No egos, none of this bullshit. No fighting for your life or your land, he said. It's just cattle ranches to the horizon in every direction. It's like God just froze everything in this one place and just let it be. Walker continued, I can imagine it's going to be a bit tough for you to come back here. If I were you, I wouldn't. Biggest regret of my life is leaving the place you're going to. Adios, amigo. I'd brush up on that Spanish. You might need it. Although there were some initial speculations about Walker joining Jimmy in the Sixes, the former prisoner explained that he was on parole and couldn't leave Montana because he needed to check in every few weeks. And with some baggage, both physical and emotional, Jimmy was gone. In Yellowstone's Season 4 finale, he returned, and it was immediately evident that he wasn't the same man. Not only did he come back with a new set of skills, but he also had a fiancée, Emily, Catherine Kelly, in tow. Unsurprisingly, Mia, Eden Brolin, didn't take the sight of them together in the bunker house well. But once the fight broke up, Jimmy later found a moment to fill in Lloyd for E.J. Smith. In Texas, I'm not fighting the neighbor to do my job because he's got the same job, and so does his neighbor. It's just cattle and cowboys all the way to the horizon, he said, echoing Walker's words. After the emotional reunion and with John's blessing, Jimmy and Emily got back on the road to go back to the Sixes. But what does this all mean? We're not sure, although it feels like Jimmy's next chapter will soon begin. And who knows, once Walker's parole is up, he could think about reuniting with Jimmy. So as you can see, there are a lot of things up in the air here, and given that unlike 1883, these two shows, Yellowstone and 6666, are connected in the same timeline, or at least that's what we're expecting. There could be a potential crossover once both series are up and running, and that is a huge deal. Number 3. Official synopsis. As for what the show will be about, that is where the synopsis for the show comes in. Founded when Comanche still ruled West Texas, no ranch in America is more steeped in the history of the West than the 6666. Still operating as it did 2 centuries before and encompassing an entire county, the 6666 is where the rule of law and the laws of nature merge in a place where the most dangerous thing one thing does is the next thing. The 6666 is synonymous with the merciless endeavor to raise the finest horses and livestock in the world, and ultimately where world-class cowboys are born and made. Now at first, that may not sound like the most interesting of things, but the beauty of the Yellowstone franchise, which we can officially call it now, is that there are ways of making certain things look boring at first, but be compelling as you go on. After all, while Yellowstone and 1883 have action, the real heart of the show lies in its characters and what they do and don't do. You're invested in their relationships, and that is what drives the show forward. For 1886, the challenge will not be just building up another great cast of characters, but making this very unique setting, compared to the other 2 shows, to stick out in the minds of viewers. With Sheridan at the helm, that's something that could absolutely happen, but only time will tell. Number 2, where will it release? That is actually a question that we may know right now, despite no official announcement coming out as of yet. You see, Yellowstone made a big splash on Paramount Network and easily became its biggest show. Probably due to Kevin Costner, but hey, we digress. And then when 1883 was announced, some felt it would join that network like other spin-off shows on other networks, NCIS, Law & Order, etc. But instead, they put the show on Paramount Plus, and it had the biggest launch of any series on the platform, and that was a big deal overall. So given that success, it's very likely that they could put this series on Paramount Plus again in order to not just drive more people over to that platform, but not put any other pressure on Yellowstone as a whole. Again, we don't have confirmation about this just yet, but it is possible and likely given what has happened with 1883 so far. Number 1. A risk? While it's never nice to be glum, we do have to admit that Yellowstone getting so many spin-offs in such a small amount of time is a risk. Sure, like other series, CSI, NCIS, Law & Order, etc., they can make their shared universes work for some time, if not an incredibly long time. But those shows are more procedural, while these are more character-driven. And eventually, people are going to be overseeing these kinds of Western stories, and so some of these spin-offs might not last as long as you think. But given that we haven't seen or heard much of what 6666 is going to be, we'll just have to wait and see how it all turns out. So, what do you think? What do you think about the potential Yellowstone spin-off 6666 and what it might be like? Do you think that Paramount is reaching a bit with this particular spin-off? Or like with 1883, do you think that they're going to be able to pull something off that is as good as Yellowstone? What themes and stories do you personally hope 6666 touches upon? Let us know in the comments below, and we will see you next time on the channel.